Black CEO denied service at bank. 10 minutes later, she fires the entire branch team. She walked into a bank, calm, confident, and wearing sneakers. 10 minutes later, she walked out after firing the entire staff. What they didn't know, she was the CEO of the entire company. What started as a moment of blatant disrespect turned into a nationwide shakeup that shocked the financial world. This is the powerful true-life story of how one Black woman turned humiliation into a movement and proved that real power doesn't need permission. Please subscribe to our channel to help us grow. It was supposed to be a routine stop. Camille Johnson, founder and CEO of Johnson Capital Group, had just landed back in Houston after a weekend keynote speech in Atlanta. Dressed in her usual sharp gray power suit and modest Louboutin heels, she stepped out of her Tesla Model X and walked into Crestview Community Bank on Maple Avenue, the very bank where her firm recently invested $18 million in expansion funding. She wasn't there to cause a scene. She simply wanted to sign a few documents in person and check on the local branch's progress. But what she received instead left her stunned and would eventually leave the entire branch jobless. As she walked in, the receptionist, a young woman in a tight ponytail named Brittany, looked up with visible disinterest. Her eyes swept over Camille in a way that made it clear she didn't belong. "Can I help you?" Brittany asked, already reaching for the standard new customer form. "Yes," Camille replied with a calm smile. "I'm here to meet with the branch manager. I was told he'd be available for a quick sit-down this morning." Brittany gave her a look like she'd just asked to speak with Beyoncé herself. "Do you have an appointment?" "I don't need one," Camille answered plainly. "Well, I'm afraid we're extremely busy today. Maybe try making an appointment online next time," she said, already looking past Camille toward the next person entering. Camille's smile didn't fade, but something in her expression hardened. She pulled out her phone and calmly typed a message. Brittany didn't seem to notice, nor did she care. Another employee, Josh, a 20-something banker with rolled-up sleeves and a Bluetooth earpiece, approached and offered a similarly dismissive tone. "This branch doesn't handle walk-ins for business accounts. You'll have to contact corporate or apply online." Camille raised an eyebrow. "Is that how you speak to all your clients?" Josh shrugged. "We don't have time for people trying to open fake business accounts. No offense." Camille nodded slowly. "No offense? Really?" She had heard stories like this before, but experiencing it firsthand, that was another thing entirely. It wasn't about pride. It wasn't even about the disrespect, though that was plenty. It was about principle. If this is how they treated a Black woman who owned a stake in the very building they were working in, how were they treating the everyday customers who walked through the door? She turned around and walked out without another word. Brittany and Josh chuckled, thinking they dismissed just another demanding walk-in. 10 minutes later, Camille returned. But this time, she wasn't alone, and she wasn't smiling. A black SUV pulled up, and out stepped two men in suits, regional compliance officers. Behind them, another car pulled up with the district operations director. Phones began buzzing across the branch. Inside, Brittany glanced up again and paled. Josh nearly dropped his iPad. Camille walked in with an air of unshakable authority and said just 4 words. "Everyone, please log off." Silence fell across the bank lobby like a heavy curtain. Customers looked up from their spots in the waiting area. The tellers stopped mid-transaction. Brittany blinked, still processing what Camille had just said. Josh looked over at the 2 men in suits, then at the district operations director, who followed closely behind them. "Wait, what's going on?" Josh asked, his confidence suddenly cracked. Camille stood at the center of the lobby, calm and composed. "You're all instructed to log out of your terminals immediately. This branch is under internal review. If you continue using company systems, it could be considered insubordination." Brittany scoffed. "Hold on, you can't just walk in here barking orders. Who even are you?" The regional compliance officer, Mr. Derek Kane, stepped forward and presented his badge. "This is Camille Johnson, CEO and majority stakeholder of Johnson Capital Group, your bank's largest private investor. This branch and 3 others operate under a portfolio Camille co-owns. She has executive oversight authority. The blood drained from Brittany's face. Josh visibly flinched. The other employees murmured in disbelief. Camille was no longer just the woman they dismissed an hour ago. She was their boss's boss's boss. I didn't know, Brittany stammered, suddenly looking much smaller in her chair. Exactly, Camille replied coldly, and that's part of the problem. The operations director, a sharp-eyed woman named Ms. Alyssa Monroe, stepped in to begin collecting employee logins and issuing suspension forms. One by one, the team was ushered into the back office to be questioned and temporarily relieved of duty. Meanwhile, customers inside the bank watched with wide eyes. Word was already spreading. Someone had taken out their phone to record, though Camille didn't mind. This needed to be seen. This is about accountability, Camille announced clearly, making sure her voice carried. No customer, no client, no human being should walk into an establishment and be made to feel less than simply because of the way they look, especially not at a bank we invest in. Josh tried to approach her. Miss Johnson, I swear, I thought you were… Camille held up her hand. Save it. The assumptions you made this morning told me everything I need to know. The irony wasn't lost on her. She had given this branch more funding than any other in the state. It was meant to be a model of diversity, professionalism, and upward mobility in a historically underserved neighborhood. Instead, the staff had become a gatekeeping force, one that looked down on the very people they were hired to serve. As security began escorting staff off the floor, a young teller named Jasmine, who had kept her head down the entire time, quietly walked over and handed Camille a neatly kept folder. I'm sorry, Ms. Johnson. I recognized you. I wanted to say something earlier, but I was scared. Camille gave her a long look. Don't be scared. Be bold next time. She turned toward the conference room. Ms. Monroe, let's begin the full audit. This is just the beginning. Inside the glass-walled conference room, the atmosphere was electric with tension. Camille sat at the head of the long oak table, flanked by Miss Alyssa Monroe and Derek Kane. The silence between them was only broken by the sound of papers being sorted and laptops clicking open. Outside, curious eyes tried to peer through the glass, but the frost setting on the windows activated, turning the glass opaque. Camille leaned forward, opening the folder Jasmine had handed her. Inside were reports she hadn't expected to find: irregular transaction logs, unexplained account closures, and what looked like multiple customer complaints that were never escalated. Looks like we've got more problems than just a rude welcome, Camille muttered, handing the paperwork to Monroe. This tells me Brittany and Josh weren't just unprofessional. They were covering things up. Monroe scanned the documents quickly. These complaint logs were supposed to be sent to HQ weeks ago. Someone's been deleting email trails. Kane frowned. This is serious. Not just bad customer service. This could be federal-level fraud. Camille nodded. Exactly. That's why I wanted this handled personally. I trusted this branch. We chose this community to lead by example. What we got instead is a culture of arrogance and discrimination. Outside, the remaining customers were being gently ushered out as the branch officially closed for emergency compliance review. News traveled fast, especially with a viral video now making rounds on TikTok and YouTube. Camille's confrontation had been caught clearly on camera, and people were eating it up. Black CEO fires entire bank staff was already trending within an hour. YouTube clips with titles like "Bank tries to humiliate Black CEO, instantly regrets it" were racking up views by the second. Camille didn't do it for the clicks, but the public reaction was validation that others had felt her pain before. Ma'am, Monroe said, lowering her voice, do you want to terminate the full branch or just the staff on duty today? Camille took a breath, weighing her options. Everyone involved in this toxic culture needs to go. If there are good people here like Jasmine, we'll move them to other branches or keep them in limited roles until the dust settles. But the leadership team? Gone, effective immediately. Kane nodded, already tapping notes into his compliance app. We'll also initiate a diversity and inclusion retraining program at all 10 regional branches. Mandatory. Camille glanced at her phone. A message popped up from her executive assistant. CNN just called. They want a statement. Of course they did. She stood and walked to the frosted glass, hands in her pockets. This wasn't just a PR moment, it was personal. For every black woman who'd been underestimated, for every person of color treated like a threat instead of a professional. Camille had just done what most only dream about. She didn't just call out injustice, she fired it, and she wasn't done yet. "Start drafting the official press release," she said firmly. "Let's make one thing clear to the world. Johnson Capital does not tolerate disrespect, discrimination, or incompetence. Period." By the next morning, Camille Johnson's name was on every major news site in America. The headline read like something out of a movie. Black CEO walks into bank, fires entire staff for discrimination and misconduct. The viral video had now crossed over 15 million views. Camille's Twitter feed was flooded with messages from everyday people, nurses, baristas, entrepreneurs, who had faced similar humiliation but never had the power to do anything about it. Her inbox was overflowing too. Some emails came from corporate heads congratulating her on taking swift action. Others came from young black professionals thanking her for standing up. But one message stood out. It was from a woman named Renee Caldwell, a retired teacher who had once been denied a loan at that very branch. "Ms. Johnson, I cried when I saw that video. I've been banking at Crestview for 22 years. They treated me like I didn't matter. But yesterday, you reminded me I do." Camille sat at her glass office desk, reading Renee's words twice. She'd gone into that branch expecting a few signatures and a 10-minute check-in. Instead, she sparked a reckoning. Her assistant, Marcus, peeked into the office. "Camille, the board is ready on Zoom, and the mayor's office just called again. They want to present you with a Community Impact Award." Camille sighed lightly. "Not looking for awards, Marcus. Just accountability." Still, she nodded and clicked into the Zoom call where the Johnson Capital Board waited. Most of the faces on screen were stiff with corporate concern, but a few smiled in support. "Ms. Johnson," began Chairman Frank Mullins, "we've reviewed the footage, compliance reports, and internal audits. We agree with your actions. However, the fallout has sparked a media frenzy, and we need to manage our message carefully." Camille leaned forward, voice cool and controlled. "The message is already out, Frank. We're not just a financial company, we're a human company. We either uphold our values or we're no better than the rest." Another board member, Tanya Ruiz, chimed in. "You didn't just fire bad employees, Camille. You set a standard. Let's make sure this isn't a one-time reaction. Let's lead the industry with systemic change." Now that Camille could agree with. By that afternoon, Camille and her team released an official video statement titled, "This wasn't just about me, it was about all of us." In it, she spoke clearly. When you walk into a place of business, you deserve to be treated with dignity, regardless of your race, your appearance, or your background. What happened to me isn't unique. It's just finally being seen. The video went mega viral. Brands took notice. Activists reposted it. Bank competitors scrambled to review their own training programs. But Camille wasn't chasing attention. She was chasing change. At the end of the day, she stood at her penthouse window, sipping tea as the sun dipped behind the Houston skyline. The work was far from over, but for the first time in a long time, she felt something shift, not just in the city, but in the culture. The world had watched a powerful black woman walk into a bank and flip the script, and Camille was just getting started. 2 weeks later, Camille returned to the same bank branch, not in a suit, but in jeans, a crisp white blouse, and sneakers. No entourage, no camera crew, just her and a clipboard tucked beneath her arm. This time, she wasn't here to make a point. She was here to rebuild. The door chimed as she stepped inside, and the vibe couldn't have been more different. Gone were the smug glares and condescending smiles. The air now buzzed with quiet energy. Part curiosity, part nervous hope. A new team had taken over. Bright faces, diverse hires. A receptionist stood tall at the front desk, greeting every guest with warmth. "Welcome to Crestview," she said with a smile. "How can I help you today?" Camille smiled back. "I'm here to speak with your new branch manager, Tony Reeves." The woman nodded and motioned toward the office in the back. "He's expecting you, Ms. Johnson." Tony stood as she entered, a tall, soft-spoken man in his late 40s with salt and pepper hair and kind eyes. He'd spent 20 years managing community credit unions and had a reputation for lifting teams from the ground up. Camille had handpicked him after just one interview. "Camille," he said warmly, extending a hand, "we've made a lot of changes." "Show me," she said. He led her on a quiet tour. Gone were the cold partitions and stiff counters. The branch now featured open workstations, digital kiosks, and comfortable seating areas with financial literacy brochures, many designed specifically for minority-owned businesses. The posters on the walls were no longer generic stock images, but featured real community members, barbers, single moms, small business owners. "We've launched weekend workshops too," Tony explained as they walked. "Budgeting, credit repair, starting your first LLC. We had 50 people show up last Saturday." Camille nodded, her heart full. This was what she'd always envisioned, a financial hub where everyone felt seen and supported. As they passed the new teller stations, a familiar face caught her eye. Jasmine, the young woman who had quietly handed Camille the folder that started everything, now wore a name tag that read, "Lead Client Advisor." She spotted Camille and lit up. "Ms. Johnson, I didn't know you were coming by today." Camille smiled. "Just wanted to see how things were going. You settling into your new role?" Jasmine grinned proudly. "It's been amazing. Mr. Reeves is teaching me how to train new hires. I'm actually mentoring 2 interns next month." "Good," Camille said. "You earned this." Just then, an elderly gentleman approached, cane in hand. "Excuse me, young lady," he said to Camille. "Are you the one who changed this place?" Camille looked at him surprised. "Well, I had something to do with it," he smiled. "Bless you. I've been banking here for 30 years. First time I've felt truly welcome in a long time." Camille swallowed the lump in her throat. Moments like these were why she did what she did. As she stepped outside into the warm Texas sun, Camille looked back through the glass one last time. The same door that had once closed her out was now wide open, to the right people, the right values, and the right future. Camille was back at headquarters, buried under quarterly reports and finalizing preparations for a national business conference in Miami, when her phone lit up. It wasn't just any call, it was from the White House liaison. She stared at the screen for a second, heart ticking faster than usual. Then she picked up. "Ms. Johnson?" the woman on the line said warmly. "This is Cheryl Dawson from the Office of Economic Opportunity. We've been following what happened at your Crestview branch and the transformation since. The President would like to formally recognize your efforts in this year's National Equity and Empowerment Summit." Camille blinked. I'm honored. Truly. "You're not just being honored," Cheryl continued. "We want you to give the keynote address." For a moment, Camille was speechless. Her mind raced, not with fear, but with purpose. She'd walked into that bank as a CEO and walked out as a symbol of something bigger. Now, the world wanted to hear what came next. After hanging up, she sat back in her chair and looked around her office. It had all started here. Her vision, her long nights, her refusal to let corporate politics water down her values. And now the country wanted her story front and center. That evening, Camille sat on her balcony overlooking Houston's skyline, typing the first lines of her speech. She reflected on what she would tell that room full of policymakers, business leaders, and young dreamers watching on livestream. "I didn't fire a team because they were rude. I ended a culture that quietly told people like me we didn't belong." As she typed, her phone buzzed again, this time a notification from YouTube. The original viral video had passed 30 million views. The title, "Black CEO Shuts Down Discriminatory Bank, Turns It into a Beacon of Hope." Camille clicked the comments, expecting the usual mix of support and trolls, but instead found an overwhelming wave of praise. One comment stood out, pinned to the top. "I showed this to my teenage daughter. She said, 'Mom, I want to be just like her.' Thank you for showing our girls what power and grace look like." Camille exhaled deeply. She wasn't chasing likes, shares, or political invitations, but the ripple effect of her actions had become unstoppable. The next day, her team met in the executive boardroom to plan the rollout of a brand new initiative. Open Doors. It would be a national campaign to identify and transform underperforming bank branches in underserved communities, turning them into centers of trust, education, and opportunity. Camille wanted every single person to know They deserved more than just access. They deserved respect. "We start with 5 cities," she said to her team. "Atlanta, Detroit, Oakland, Memphis, Newark. Let's light up the map." No one blinked. They were with her. All in. The legacy Camille was building didn't just belong to her. It belonged to every little girl in braids who watched that video and saw themselves in her strength. The ballroom at the National Equity and Empowerment Summit was glowing. Gold-trimmed chandeliers sparkled overhead. Business elites, government officials, and top CEOs from across the country filled the rows. But there was one name they were all here to hear: Camille Johnson. She stepped onto the stage in a sleek navy pantsuit, not a hint of nervousness in her stride. Cameras flashed. Reporters leaned forward. Young Black entrepreneurs and high school students watched from the live streams across the nation. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice strong, "I didn't come here to tell you a story about banking. I came to tell you a story about dignity." Silence settled in as Camille continued. 2 months ago, I walked into a branch of my own company and was denied service. Not because of policy, but because of perception. The people in that room saw a Black woman in casual clothes and assumed I didn't belong. They were wrong. Gas rippled through the room, even though many knew the story. But hearing it from her own mouth, it hit different. I've spent my life building companies. I've been the youngest, the only, the first. But on that day, I realized something. It didn't matter how many titles I held if the system still refused to see my humanity. She paused, letting the truth land. But instead of walking out quietly, I made a decision. Not just to fire a team, but to rewire a culture. That branch, it's now one of our highest performing locations. Not because of tighter rules or shinier desks, but because we hired people who lead with heart. The audience erupted into applause. A few stood. Even the skeptics couldn't deny the power of her presence. She leaned closer to the mic. "This isn't just a Black story. This is a human story. And what we build next, what we invest in next, needs to reflect the truth that every person, no matter their skin tone or zip code, deserves a seat at the financial table." After her speech, she was met with a standing ovation that lasted nearly 2 minutes. Even the president stood up and clapped. Backstage, her assistant Marcus grinned wide. "You did it, Camille. You made history." She smiled, eyes misty but fierce. "We're just getting started." Over the next year, her Open Doors initiative exploded. Crestview Bank transformed 50 more branches. Cities competed to be next. Camille launched a digital academy to mentor young women of color in business and finance. Her story was turned into a best-selling book, an option for a streaming series. But the thing she treasured most? Every week, without fail, Camille received handwritten letters. Thousands of them. From janitors, from single dads, from teenage girls who now studied business with fire in their hearts. They didn't write about money. They wrote about being seen. And on the anniversary of that fateful bank visit, Camille returned quietly to the same branch. No cameras, no speeches. She greeted Jasmine at the door, sat down in the community space, and watched a young woman give a financial literacy talk to a group of teens. Camille smiled. This wasn't just a bank anymore. It was a movement. Camille Johnson's story is more than just a tale of corporate power. It's a reminder that real leadership means using your position to lift others, challenge broken systems, and rewrite the rules. What started as a humiliating moment turned into a national movement that empowered thousands and opened doors that had long been shut. If this story inspired you, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a powerful, real-life transformation. Share this with someone who needs to be reminded that respect is not optional, and true power speaks with action. Stay hopeful, stay inspired, and remember, you belong in every room you walk into.